Welcome back for another pregnancy update. My name is Erica. If you are new to my channel and you want to follow along with my pregnancy updates, please hit the subscribe button so you can be notified when I put up a new video. Now, to resume the story of my first trimester. So I believe I was at about 9 weeks along when I left off in the last video. Basically, from about week 5 to through week 12, my symptoms kind of remained the same, just varying in severity. And so I was super nauseous all day, but not necessarily throwing up. I was just constantly fighting to keep food down, anything I ate. People definitely had a lot of suggestions for me, and I certainly tried some of them. 1 week peppermint tea would work, the next week it wouldn't, and that's just kind of how things went the entire time. So I really wish I had a lot of suggestions for you, but I don't. I just tried anything, and if something worked, I kept going with it until it didn't work anymore. My sense of smell was really, really strong, but I couldn't necessarily smell or taste anything sweet unless it was very sweet. That said, just because the food smelled strong did not mean it was appealing at all. In fact, it was very off-putting. I think because I couldn't smell them in their entirety. Like coffee. I really like coffee. I actually used to work in a coffee shop, and I actually kind of like the smell of it even more than I like the taste of it. But now suddenly I thought the smell of freshly ground coffee was the worst thing in the world. And it took me several weeks to figure that out. So my husband gets up a good 3 to 4 hours before I do in the morning, makes himself his coffee, goes to work, and I was just getting up in the morning and so bewildered why the apartment smelled moldy and musty. Just our main living area was particularly bad. And eventually I was able to piece together that it was the smell of freshly ground coffee that was bothering me so much. And so we just made a mental note to try to keep the patio door open after grinding coffee. I had essentially stopped drinking it at that point because I thought that it was just going to be making my nausea worse, and it actually wasn't that appealing to me at the time. Actually, nothing was really that appealing to me at the time. Oh, except for like hearty meals like spaghetti and meat sauce. That was really good. I was very fatigued. There's not much more to add to that. I was laying around most of the day, and making supper at the end of the evening was still exhausting. I was beginning to fumble around for clothes. I was having next to an impossible time fitting into jeans, and trying to comfortably contain myself within a bra was not working. And so I was basically living in sweatpants and baggy shirts, and honestly just trying to stay home as much as possible. Now, between weeks 10 and 11 though, I began to wonder what the results were of my latest blood draw. For those of you who are new here, I have Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune hyperthyroid disorder, and needs to be closely monitored during pregnancy. And so I had been going for blood work every 2 to 4 weeks or so, expecting my medication to be adjusted accordingly as I went through my pregnancy. I have more videos on that. I can try to link to them below. So I had gone in somewhere between the 8 to 9 week mark, I believe, to get that blood work done, and assumed that once the results came in, I would hear from my endocrinologist's office. But I never did. So once I'm getting around the 10 to 11 week mark, I'm like really starting to wonder what the results were. I was curious. So I checked online, and the numbers did not look good to me at all. I didn't really know. I was having a hard time figuring out what those numbers meant in correlation to the medication dose I was on at the time. And obviously didn't want to be playing around with that dosage on my own. And so, but this was on a weekend, of course, checking on the weekend. I had to wait until Monday, the beginning of my 11th week, to call the endocrinologist's office and ask them to review my results. So I did that, and a full day later, they get back to me and are like, oh yeah, you need to cut your medication by 2/3. So I had been over-medicating for the previous 2 weeks, and the more I thought about it, the more upset I got, because I just had no idea how this could have been affecting my baby. And I was also on progesterone at the time, and so I really wouldn't have known if I was experiencing a missed miscarriage in the meantime. I thought of calling my OB and asking if there was any possibility that I could get in for an appointment before the weekend, but I also knew I already had an appointment scheduled for the following Monday, and by this point it was at least Wednesday, and the chances that they could have gotten me in much sooner than my appointment was already booked was very slim, and I knew that. So after humming and hawing about it for a bit, I just decided to stop being anxious, give the situation over to the Lord again, and just go about with our plans at the time. My husband and I were going out of town for the weekend, and so we did that, thoroughly enjoyed our weekend, and just waited until Monday afternoon rolled around. And so I go in for my appointment on Monday afternoon. I was 12 weeks along at this point, but just barely. And I share my concerns with my OB. She immediately puts me on the table and she pulls out both a fetal Doppler and a handheld ultrasound machine. Now, she had used a small handheld ultrasound machine on me previously and had been able to detect a heartbeat at around the 8-week mark. So I kind of thought she'll be able to see something, right? But she tried both machines and just could not get a clear reading. She showed me what she could see on the ultrasound machine, and neither of us could see anything flickering there. So she was really uncertain what to tell me because of my history with previous miscarriages and now this mess up with my thyroid medication. She was not keen on just sending me home and telling me, this is normal, we should be able to see something next time. Because it's not uncommon for it to be hard for them to detect something like that with the small machines that they have in the office, even at the 11 or 12 week mark. But she just wasn't comfortable sending me home, given what I had already been through. And so she immediately calls for an ultrasound to be done, but unfortunately they couldn't get me in right then. I had to wait 2 hours, which in hindsight is not very long, but it felt so long. So I called my husband and let him know what was going on. I called my mom and filled her in. I was very worried. I really didn't know what to think at the time. Because we only live about 15 minutes from the hospital, I went home and decided to take a bath and try to distract myself a little bit. I really didn't want my mind going to all the unknowns. I was just determined to continue holding the situation before the Lord. I was just holding on to the fact that we simply didn't know anything for certain right then. And eventually I was able to come to a point of peace, or a place of peace, where had the situation gone either way, I knew the Lord that during this time would be okay. Really heavily placed the hymn Higher Ground on my mind, and I just in particular was dwelling on the verse that says, "My heart has no desire to stay where doubts arise and fears dismay. Though some may dwell where these abound, my prayer, my aim is higher ground." And I was finding that higher ground in trusting Christ and trusting Him for that peace that passes all understanding. So my husband came home from work and picked me up, and we drove to the hospital. It was a very silent drive. We had both been here before, unfortunately, and it was not a fun, familiar place to be. And then when we got to the hospital, there was a bit of a wait again because there was a delay in our registration. We ended up having to go back to the front desk, and finally we were able to have our ultrasound tech take us back into the ultrasound room. And I just have to say, God was so good to us. The staff members that we came across, and this man in particular, were just no exception in how kind they were towards us. Our ultrasound tech's name was Scott, and I had actually had this man previously for a thyroid scan. And just an older gentleman, super sweet. He had familiarized himself with our situation, and that in and of itself was just very comforting. Obviously, he didn't want to be the bearer of bad news, but all he can do is do his job. And so he got me up onto the table and started the exam as quickly as he could. And he found a heartbeat almost immediately. We were so happy. My husband told me later he had wanted to hug the ultrasound tech. And so after quickly checking my ovaries and whatnot, and then we just spent, I don't know how long, but he just let us take a really good look at the baby. He got us several good pictures. We got to see her just kicking and sucking her thumb, and it was just so sweet. And just such an incredible time. The detail that we could see, the little fingers and toes and the little nose, was just incredible. And to see the movement and knowing, like at this point I couldn't feel anything, but just knowing that that is inside of me was just really incredible. After this, I texted my mom, I texted my prayer partner, let them know what was going on. We checked in with my doctor, and we went home just rejoicing. We were so thankful to know that everything was okay. Basically the next couple weeks just kind of carried on as they had been up until that point. I finally thought that I was starting to get some of my energy back around the 13-week mark or so. Then I got knocked down with a head cold. And so I was back to not being able to keep food down very well and just being super tired and not really getting anything done. So hence I've been very slow in getting these videos up. I apologize for that. But some things had to take priority during the days that I was feeling better. And so yeah, we will wait and see how the second trimester goes. I am 16 weeks along at the time of filming this. If you're interested in watching more, please subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.